What's going on, guys? Welcome to the very first episode of Copy and Donuts. I'm Max Hofer, junior copywriter here at Epicosity.
And I'm Doug Morano, senior copywriter here at Epicosity.
And essentially what this series going forward is about, it's going to be all sorts of writing tips and insights that you can take into your work life.
Right.
Yeah.
See what I did there?
Yeah,
right?
right. Yeah, with the W.
Right. So what are we going to be talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about how your writing side hustle essentially can feed into your everyday work life.
Right.
Like for example, personally, I'm a local filmmaker. Doug is an author and editor. And we feel like a lot of the things we do outside of work help carry into the things we bring to the table here at Epicosity.
So tell me a little bit about how script writing and the filmmaking process, what skills do you build there that you can bring into your marketing and copywriting world?
Well, essentially what I've learned through screenwriting and working here in marketing, the main motif they share is storytelling. So essentially working to build characters, build relationships with the audience you're trying to engage. And essentially, yeah, it takes a long time. There's going to be a lot of bad stuff you have to filter through to get to the good stuff. But yeah, it's just kind of constant writing and world building and storytelling, something we can all kind of connect with.
Yeah, and I guess some people out there who may not be familiar with ad writing and marketing writing may say storytelling. You know, how do you tell a story on a billboard? What about storytelling fuels the copywriting experience at Epicosity?
Essentially, what fuels the experience at Epicosity? Essentially, I would say it's more something along the lines of basically what I said earlier with connection. And sometimes you can tell whether it's a full-length feature film or a 30-second commercial or even like one headline on a billboard. There's something that audience can gravitate to, connect to, something you can bring out in them that makes them say, hey, I get that. I feel that. Like, I feel like they get me.
Sure. Yeah.
And so how has being an author and editor for you, someone who's curated tons of stories, how do you feel like that kind of helps your work here at Epicosity?
That's a good question. Over time, when you see enough stories, and I think it connects back to what you said about being a good storyteller, is you get kind of a good spidey sense for what's not working right away. Even if you can't put your finger on it right away, you get a sense for what has momentum and what doesn't. When it comes to storytelling and copywriting. The other thing that I find really useful is because I work with such a wide variety of authors in my books, is that you're essentially dealing with that number of brands per book. Each writer is its own brand. And so it's kind of that I kind of get to get out of myself a little bit. And sometimes writing is a solitary endeavor. And when you are in the business of editing other authors, you have to kind of come out of yourself a little bit and relate to them on a different level. You learn how to write and reflect different voices, which is a great tool to have in your toolbox when it comes to copywriting for clients here at Epicosity.
Absolutely.
So if you understand how to capture a voice very quickly, it makes you a more efficient copywriter. It makes you more empathetic storyteller, and just a more well-rounded writer in general.
Yeah, and what would you say because there's such a thing as creative whiplash, jumping from one brand, one voice to the next. What is it you find that you do that like helps you really dive into that other person's voice and help bring out the best in them?
So some of the authors that I have worked with for years, it's taken me that long to figure out who they are as a writer, what their voice is, what their creative values are. Mm-hmm. Okay. That can cause whiplash. Like when you're starting to work in a particular area for 8 hours a day, and then you have to put a different hat on, it can be difficult.
Sometimes like when you have to jump from one brand to the next, at least this happens to me, where sometimes like you lose a tone of voice or you lose like a way a brand carries themselves, just because like either you run into brands that share very similar values or are a complete 180, like some don't let you write as freely as others do.
Sure.
And in a way I kind of relate it to like writing characters for a screenplay. It's like, well, crap, it's like, is this character gonna be any different from any of the other ones I've attempted to write before? And so it's like, I agree with you. I think it's taking the time with it and just really, I don't know, it's like you can't do it all at once.
Yeah. So like a martial arts master may be fluent in 5, 6, 7 different styles. Yeah. And I think over time as a writer, you start to develop those lanes that you can drop into. And most writers will fit sort of into one of those lanes. And so you sort of start to develop a feel for, this is the type of writing I'm doing at this very moment. And so it's definitely, you do change hats, but over time you become more adept at switching up styles on the fly.
Yeah.
So
that creativity on command really just kind of kicks into gear.
Yeah, and that's another thing to note. You can't really wait for it. When you've got a day job and a side hustle, you have to be creative on command. I like that phrasing. And it prevents you from procrastinating.
Yeah, and essentially it's like something I don't do regularly, and that's exercise, but it's for the brain. So like the thing that I find helpful about writing in my spare time is that if it can be something completely unrelated to something I'm doing at work, but just the practice and keeping up with it really, like, I don't know, some days you'll just find you have a second wind here and it just kind of keeps you going, and it just you find something out there unrelated, but somehow there's a way it relates to what you're currently working on. I think that's been probably the biggest surprise to working here almost a year.
One of the authors that I really love working with, I won't say who it is, but he has a theory about momentum, and it's kind of what you're talking about. And if you keep moving on something, anything, then the good stuff is going to come, and you just never stop. You go from one thing to the next, and you build that momentum, and you start to really get comfortable with who you are as a creative person. You get comfortable operating within different creative worlds, different creative sensibilities, and pretty soon it just kind of all feels like one performance in a way. Yeah. And
the thing that I think, like, just in talking with you this morning, I think the thing is, like, that we're getting at with this conversation is, like, when you're writing, try to be versatile. Yeah. It's easy to get, like, super comfortable wherever you're at. At least I know it is for me. So, like, putting yourself out there can be challenging, but it's also exciting to try new things. Like, a couple of the short films I did were mostly comedies, but I've been working on one that's got more of a horror theme to it. And that's been, like, really challenging and kind of discouraging at times. But the more I feel like I'm working at it, the more it's starting to click, and the more I'm feeling better about branching out into this unfamiliar territory.
Right. And for me, I've had the privilege of editing authors who are far better writers than I am. And they will always be better writers than I am. Some of the worldwide best-selling horror authors have been in my anthologies. And what that has taught me is to be courageous and to have a point of view, but also to sort of humble myself and really learn from the moves that they make in the stories that they send me. So every time I'm editing a story, I've got a front row seat to a masterclass, essentially. One that I have the opportunity to impact in small ways, but part of that versatility is putting yourself in a position where you're learning from somebody who's better than you are, and being willing to just sort of take the knee and say, I've got some things to learn. And even if I've got a role in this creative process, I understand what that is, and I can humble myself to be in a position to absorb some of this wisdom.
Yeah, that's how I feel around you every day.
Well, thanks, guy. I feel the same way about you.
Oh, stop. Well, I think that's coming to our conclusion.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for the first episode of Copy and Donuts. We'll have plenty more in the future.
Stay caffeinated. Cheers, brother.
Cheers, man.
It's glazed.
It's a glazing.
Ooh. You gotta quit giving your stuff away for free.